President Biden addressing Americans for the first time since pulling all troops out of Afghanistan. The president praising his efforts despite weeks of chaos, violence, and the deaths of 13 American service members.
I believe this is the right decision, a wise decision, and the best decision for America. I was not going to extend this forever war. That assumption that the Afghan government would be able to hold on for a period of time beyond military drawdown turned out not to be accurate. Let me be clear. Leaving August the 31st is not due to an arbitrary deadline. It was designed to save American lives.
And President Biden making this bold declaration on how the 20-year war ended.
The extraordinary success of this mission was due to the incredible skill, bravery, and selfless courage of the United States military and our diplomats and intelligence professionals.
Pete, let's get your thoughts first. I know you were watching the speech upstairs.
You can hear me?
A little bit. A little bit.
I will say, I'll start where the speech ended. He ended by saying we have a future that is safer, which anyone who's looking what's happened right now knows is fundamentally not true. So everything you walk back from that was the last half of it was a straw man, as if we were debating about whether we should get out of Afghanistan or not. That litigation has been done for quite some time. And he also presented a false choice of either you have to leave or you have to escalate, and built around that straw man as well. So for me, it was a lot of blaming. I mean, who did he blame? He spent a quarter of the speech blaming Donald Trump for where he is, and then blaming U.S. citizens for not doing enough to get out of the country. I also go back to where he started. He talked about only the U.S. would have had the capacity to do something of this size and scale. And he emphasized the numbers time and time again, although we'll get to the numbers of U.S. citizens because there was something very revealing there. To which I think a lot of Americans looked into their television screen and said, only the United States would have had the capacity to not have to do it this way. Mm-hmm. There were so many decisions that led us to this point, decision points we could have made. And I keep going back to the consensus point that you made yesterday, Greg, as if this was a consensus for an extremely successful mission, whitewashing over the entire reality of how we got where we were, to include the new revelation that the Taliban had offered us to secure Kabul. We had been given the opportunity to secure Kabul weeks ago before the Taliban entered, and we declined. So there was no attrition. There was no contrition, meaning there was no recognition that mistakes were made. Instead, he doubled down on what I believe is a false narrative and a false choice.
There were a lot of straw mans in there. There's also this on call for number 4. This is just about an observation, and not just from here at this table, but from in the White House briefing room, about the tone of the president. Watch. Okay.
Us observed, he seemed angry at the beginning of the speech today. Who's he mad at?
I would say I'll give you a different assessment of what I saw, which is that he gave a forceful assessment, laid out a forceful case to the American people as to why it was time to wind down a 20-year war that has led to the loss of thousands of lives. And in his view, and I think he made a firm case of this, it's not in our national security interest to be on the ground anymore.
There's that, and that might be true, hopefully is the case, that they don't have the capacity to do that. But the tone was strange. It was like it started and really came in hot initially.
I don't, I always hated it when they would mind read Trump, but
Yeah.
I feel that the dramatic changes in Biden suggest that it's performance all the time. I mean, the fact that he can go this way, go that way, they get tired. It is as though that it's a suit that it's put on.
You don't think he's sincere?
No. I don't, and I'll tell you why, because that wasn't a speech. It was a bait and switch. To Pete's point, what they're trying to do is redefine the outrage against the president as directed against the decision to leave and the achievement of the troops. So that if you are mad about this, you're actually heaping scorn on the troops, when it's really obvious, and we've talked about this. No one is upset with the troops, and no one is upset with the decision. He was, and the thing that kind of, talking about the casualties of war, he went through this. No one disputes the cost of war is understood. We're focused actually on the cost of incompetence. Everybody understands that war is hell. We have friends that are missing limbs. We have missing friends. So when he goes through that, it's like, no, It's not about that. It's about your damned incompetence. It's like, yes, we wanted to go on the maiden voyage of the Titanic. We didn't expect you to hit the iceberg, right? He's conflating these things. And he also conflated, like, it was a weird situation for him to take credit for this extraordinary success while at the same time blaming Trump. So he's got this weird thing. He's got it all backwards. The decision that Trump made is correct. The follow-through is abysmal. What he's doing is the opposite. He's saying the decision is bad, but look at what I did, huh? I really got us out of this mess. No, you got us out of a mess that you created. The biggest airlift in history is your way of papering over a mission that you screwed up for reasons that we can't begin to understand because you've screwed up on every decision point.
Call for number 2, if you would. This is President Biden talking about his predecessor, if we have that.
My predecessor, the former president, signed an agreement with the Taliban to remove U.S. troops by May the 1st, just months after I was inaugurated. It included no requirement that the Taliban work out a cooperative governing arrangement with the Afghan government, but it did authorize the release of 5,000 prisoners last year, including some of the Taliban's top war commanders, among those who just took control of Afghanistan.
Ronald will give you the floor after that.
He's trying to, obviously spread the blame. He wants Trump to share some of the responsibility. To use the Titanic analogy, what he did was they hit the iceberg right away. The Titanic was mortally injured, but then it sailed on and they did a pretty good job of patching it up. You know, this was, as the National Review says, a catastrophic success. You had all of the bad intelligence, the most horrific failure of intelligence, maybe except for the Russians not knowing that Hitler was coming in 1939.
What time frame are you talking about?
I'm talking about the intelligence in the beginning when he came in and did not know that the Afghan army would run.
So July.
How could you not know the Afghan army would run? How could you be so confident, conversely, that the Afghan army would fight that you would hang your entire policy on the expectation of a decent interval? That the Afghan army would fight, you'd get people out in an orderly fashion, and then at some point the Afghan army would exhaust itself and the Taliban would ultimately win, and it wouldn't blame Biden because it happened 2 years after he pulled the troops out. So what happened is he had that expectation of the Taliban being confronted by the Afghan army. Did not happen. Then he had already evacuated all the American troops, had the civilians, so the most vulnerable people had been left behind. The warriors had been shipped out. Then they had to reship in other warriors to protect the civilians. So it was a real, a massive, massive screw up that they did a pretty good job of cleaning up by the end, but it doesn't undo all of the horror that happened initially.
The Afghan military, the president spent a lot of time reiterating that, and I only can imagine that, one, that he believes it, and two, it probably polls very well. And it has been very offensive to a lot of people who said, well, wait, you left in the middle of the night at Bagram. You didn't even tell the Afghan commander that you were going. I mean, you took away the air support. They did melt away, and we are where we are. Katie, you can comment on that, but also I just want to play this for you in terms of the issue about Afghan girls. This is what Biden said during the speech. This call for number 3.
We'll continue to support the Afghan people through diplomacy, international influence, and humanitarian aid. We'll continue to push for regional diplomacy engagement to prevent violence and instability. We'll continue to speak out for the basic rights of the Afghan people, especially women and girls, as we speak out for women and girls all around the globe.
That is also probably an issue where they're seeing, again, from the feedback from their Twitter feeds, from their friends, and from the polling, that that's an issue.
It's a really naive point of view. I know that they're trying to clean this up and figure out some kind of solution to this disaster they've created. by, there's dispute about what the military generals said and did not say. A number of them would say that they told the president, including a number of U.S. senators, that the Afghan army was not prepared. That's also part of this big question about being in Afghanistan for 20 years and this lie that was propped up that the Afghan army was capable of fighting off the military. But in terms of moving forward with diplomacy, when it comes to talking to the Taliban through diplomatic channels that aren't even in Afghanistan, they're in another country, it's just completely opposite of the reality on the ground. They are hanging people from our helicopters. We have video of the Taliban going door to door to execute translators and interpreters who helped us. Women are at the very bottom of the list when it comes to, especially girls, when it comes to rights in Afghanistan. I was talking to a Marine friend today who said a lot of the girls are probably being sold off to men as we speak. We know that as the Taliban was coming through all of these villages, they were taking a number of women from their families and forcing them to get married, including, of course, underage girls. So this idea that they can talk their way out of this in terms of diplomacy now, it's just a dishonest way of looking at it. And I think broadly speaking, as we move forward with this, the administration talks a lot about diplomacy in a number of areas. Well, diplomacy is the way that we deal with the nuclear Iran. Diplomacy is the way that we deal with China and Russia without these conditions that we've seen. And I think the future for those girls, but also the future of our foreign policy and the safety of America is at stake if they're going to pin it on talking to people rather than having some kind of force behind their words.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.